Welcome to Gamepinions episode 1. I'm your host, Calvin, and today we're going to be having our actual content. This is no longer a prologue. This is going to be our actual podcasting content that we are going to be starting off with here. So today I'm going to be talking about God of War. That is the word of the day, the topic of the day, God of War, and why I have this weird disconnect with the franchise and why I'm still on the fence about buying the new game that came out a couple weeks ago. So before I get into that, we're going to have another topic, and that's going to be my gaming history. Every time I have somebody on the show, and this is going to be a constant, whenever I have someone on the show, we're going to talk about, their gaming experiences growing up. That way, whenever they come back on, you kind of know like where their backstory is. I think that's really cool. I think it's interesting, for me to know too. So we kind of want to go in there, and for this God of War disconnection that I kind of have, I think that my gaming history kind of explains why I might have some disconnect there. So when I was growing up, I grew up in the 90s. I think our primary system back then was a Sega Genesis, and it was kind of that way for a long time. So I had a Sega Genesis from as early as I can remember, and I had it up until like Christmas of 4th grade, I want to say, maybe 5th grade. I think it was 4th. So I had it up until, Christmas of 4th grade. During that time, like prior to my 4th grade class, all my friends had these new systems that I just thought were absolutely crazy. When I saw a Nintendo 64 for the first time, I think it was over a cousin's house. We were playing Mario Kart. I'm just like, this is insane. Like, I don't even know how you guys are playing this game. This controller is ridiculous. It has 3 handles. I'm like, what is going on here? And it was just really bizarre to me. I'm like, I'm so used to my D-pad, my 3 buttons, my start button. We had this turbo controller, so you could like break any game with it just by flipping one of those switches. It was hilarious, but it's just funny because I would go over to my friend's house. We'd play like Mario Kart, or when the PlayStation 2 came out, I'd be watching them play Grand Theft Auto. I'm just like, oh my God, my parents would never let me play this. I'm just like, the graphics are just, blow your mind. And because it wasn't really mine, I never really had a chance to play it. But I just saw like all these crazy games. It's like, this is insane. Like, you guys are actually playing this at your home? I'm like, I'll never have one of those. So it's kind of funny. So I'd go over there, we'd play those games, but then when they came over my house, it was kind of like retro day. So, we'd go from playing, Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas or whatever. You'd come home and we'd be playing, like, come home to my house, we'd be playing like NHL 96 on the Sega Genesis, which is a fantastic game. Still to this day, my favorite sports game. I am unbeatable in that game. At least I was back then, because I knew an exploit on how to score and all that. That's when you have that much time to play the game, you're gonna figure out stuff. But we had just this Sega Genesis. I'm pretty sure my brother beat the Sonic games millions of times. He still does to this day on various platforms that he has. I'm sure he'll be on the show at some point, and he'll talk about his Sonic experiences, which I actually can't wait for that show. I think that's gonna be awesome. So. Definitely stick around for that. I'm sure he'll want to be a part of Gamepinions in some way, shape, or form. So, but yeah, he probably beat him a whole bunch of times. And I remember him and my sister, they'd play as Sonic and Tails, and I had this broken controller that they would give me because I wanted to play too, and so I would just sit there, mashing the buttons, thinking that I'm doing something. So, there was a time where I think. Sega had these, there's like candy boxes where it was like a candy thing inside of like a controller shaped like box, kind of like an Altoids box, but it was like plastic. And I had a green one, and ever since then I wanted a green Sega Genesis controller, and I never got one. I think that was, if I'm being honest, that might have been my my first association with the color green and why it ended up being, one of my favorite colors. I mean, obviously red is also another one of my favorite colors as well. So Christmas time is like, boom, it's awesome. But not to get too far off topic. So, so they would play those games. I'd watch them play the Sonic games. And to this day, I'm not great at Sonic. I always just have a hard time playing it. I just, back then, I think I was too young to understand it. And now I just don't care. But I was playing Sonic Mania and I loved it. It's just, my brother, though, he grew up playing that and I grew up watching it. So it was still kind of a disconnect there. We had Pitfall Harry, which was like the sequel to Pitfall, the Atari game. There was parts in the game where you'd go and you'd enter like the world where you're back to being his father, I guess, and he'd be, which was pretty funny too. But it was just weird. It was like when people would come over our house, it was like they were going back in time and they were seeing these like obscure Genesis games that like they've never seen before, like Sonic 3D Blast, which is like a really random Sonic game. Sonic Spinball. We had Bubble. What is it? Bubble and Squeak, I think it is. There's just a whole bunch. I'll have to bring out my Sega Genesis games at one point in time. Maybe for a conversation with my brother, we'll go ahead and talk about those. But we had like the Adventures of Pac-Man, which was just like the worst game of all time. Like now that I think about it, but it's just funny stuff like that. There's some weird like back history and all that. But we had the Sega Genesis for the longest time. We did have a computer though, and the thing with the computer is that I have a hard time kind of putting a timeline on the PC and when we had it, because it was still a Windows 98, so I know we had games on there. I know we had 3D games on there, but then we also got like this really big Dell for whatever reason. I don't really remember. I think because my mom worked at like Comcast or something, and they had struck a deal with Dell, so we got this free Dell computer. So a lot of our games went on there. I just remember we had, some Madden 2000 was on there. We were kind of like, we liked the sports games. We had a whole bunch of Madden games on the Genesis too. We even, would go to like the Video Star, the local Video Star in Jersey, and we would go and we'd rent games from there. Tom and Jerry, I remember that was a big favorite for my brother and sister. They loved that game. There was some weird games, but when we had our PC, though, like I said, it's hard for me to wrap around when we actually had it. It had to be in the early 2000s, though, and it had to be probably around when Star Wars Episode 1 came out, because the first PC game I remember playing is the Star Wars Pod Racer on there, and I absolutely love that game. That game was absolutely phenomenal. I remember there's this one stage that I never was able to beat. And I mean, I can't remember like what it was, located at, but it was like that one, like when you're in the sky and you have the two lanes. And if you're on the top lane, you go really fast. If you fall down to the bottom, which is like super easy to do, there's no chance you're going to win because you go super slow. But that was the only one I never was able to beat. But that game, it was phenomenal. Winning in that game felt like such an accomplishment. And that was like my favorite PC game. Like I just could not get enough of that game. And really, I mean, all my brothers and sisters, my brother and sisters, no, it's just my brother and my sister, they loved it too. They really did. They had a great time with that game too. I think my brother probably enjoyed it a little bit more than my sister did. And my brother was just better at it than me. That's kind of a common trend. My brother was always better at games than I was. And I think it was because he understood them a little bit better than I did. But I think he's also a little bit more detailed with his gameplay than I am. He's definitely is more resilient to more difficult games where I kind of just, I kind of shy away from him a little bit. And that might not be as true to this day. I feel like I definitely, embrace harder games now than I used to. But there was just this, time where it was, I don't know, it's just I just wasn't good at doing that. And there's kind of some areas of that still linger. But I try to play as much as I can, the more difficult games. I know Evil Within, the original one, was kind of a difficult game, at least for me, but I still stuck with it and I still made it through and I really enjoyed it. I still really enjoy Bloodborne. My brother beat it easily. I kind of linger. I don't really finish. I've had this issue for the last couple of years. There's so many games I want to play that I'll play them for a little bit and then I'll move on to the next one. Just trying to get experience in the games and just trying to play as many as I can. But beating games for me just recently, the recent years, has been really hard. There's just not a lot of time to do it, and time's super expensive. I've found out. But yeah, so we had our PC. And I think what really did it in with our PC, and we also had the Toy Story game on the PC. I forgot to mention that. That game was freaking awesome. Toy Story 2, one of the best movie games of all time. I'd say that is the best movie game of all time. Excellent game. So I'd say that we moved on from our PC after I got a NASCAR game. I was really a big fan of NASCAR back then. I'm still kind of a fan, but it's just Jeff Gordon doesn't do it anymore, and he was my favorite driver, so it's just like I kind of lost interest in a way. Um, but yeah, we got this one NASCAR game. I think it was NASCAR Thunder 2003. We got it on Christmas, and I remember that crashed our computer. We lost everything. All of our data was just gone when we tried to install it. It was because I think it was a game meant for Windows 2000, but we tried to download it on Windows 96. We weren't super knowledgeable about this stuff back in the day. I mean, this was like, pre-Steam and all that. This is like back when you just bought the disc and you installed it, and it would take forever to install. I think after that point, my parents were like, you know what, we should just get these guys a game system. So we kind of thought that, well, actually, before that, we did have a Game Boy Advance. We all kind of got one just for our birthdays. I think my brother got one for Christmas. I didn't really know what it was. Like, I had my Game Boy Advance, but when it came to like getting the good games for it, I had no idea what to get. I had Spider-Man 2 on there. Actually, no, I think it was just the original Spider-Man. I had the original Spider-Man on there. I had Pokemon, which was just, my sister found that by mistake, and then we all just kind of latched onto it. We all played the Pokemon Silver, Pokemon Gold, and Pokemon Crystal. We all had the different Pokemon games there. And that was kind of the turning point for our Game Boy Advance careers. Another game I had on there, which I actually really did love and I did complete to the end, was the Star Wars trilogy. It was just this random game that just released on there, but it was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was pretty excellent. I actually loved that game quite a bit, so that was probably one of my favorite games on there. But it wasn't up until now that I'm going back and playing like Advance Wars 2 and the original Advance Wars and stuff like that. Fire Emblem I kind of discovered. I played that on the 3DS because I knew about Fire Emblem. I just never got into it, and I played that on the 3DS when the Ambassador program came out. So we did have our Game Boys. I had like Hot Wheels. That was my first game I had on there, which was fun. But once again, like I just didn't know enough about it. My brother was definitely more knowledgeable about those early Nintendo Game Boy Advance games. He knew what games to get. So it was just a really bizarre time. I don't think I got. I mean, I still loved my Game Boy Advance. I absolutely adored that thing. But after we had that, we ended up getting a PlayStation 2. It was a Christmas present. My parents put it in a fan box, and we opened it up because they're like, "Go look at the motor. Go look at the motor." And it was a blue PlayStation 2 game box, which I think is the box inside the box, but I think they just wanted to make it smaller, so I think they got rid of the original box, and it was just in that blue box. Unless the blue box is the box, but I don't really remember. It's been such a long time. But we were shocked. We thought that if we were going to get a system, it was probably going to be a GameCube because that was when they dropped to $99, and that was kind of a big thing. We're like, oh, well, at least, we'll probably be able to get a GameCube. PlayStation 2 is too expensive. Xbox is too expensive. We're just going to, probably get a GameCube, and that's fine. And I honestly probably would have been okay with it. But we ended up getting a PlayStation 2, and that's kind of our first modern console that we got. And our first games were Jimmy Neutron. We had SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, which ended up being amazing. And then we had a Rocket Power game because I guess my parents wanted to, kind of give us our favorite shows. We were fans of all three of those shows. So, and all three of those games were actually really good. They were, this is a different era. Back then you'd have these just, obscure, or not really obscure, but you'd have these, sponsored games by like THQ and stuff like that. And they'd be pretty decent. I'm not sure how well they held up now, but I'm sure they'd be pretty decent. But even during the PlayStation 2 era, just skipping ahead, even during that time, there was, kind of a question for me, like, what games am I supposed to get? I'd get all the sports games and stuff. I'd be like, okay, well, I know I like sports. NASCAR, I can finally play it now without it crashing anything. Okay, that's cool. But there was just this weird disconnect because I did not know what games I should get. So I remember it might have been in 5th grade or 4th grade later that year. my friends started playing God of War, and they were like, "Oh man, this game is awesome." I'm just like, "Oh well, that's it sounds pretty cool." And some of the stuff that happened in that game, I mean, I didn't even have a word for in my vocabulary for. So, I mean, I was like, my parents are never going to let me play that. And I honestly didn't even ask if I could. I looked up the game because we had like little computers or whatever. I'm just like, nah, not going to happen. I looked it up on our Windows 96 computer and I was like, yeah, that's not going to be a thing. There's just no way. So I ended up not getting God of War, and I think during that time, if I were to play a hack and slash game like God of War and even God of War 2 when it came out, like I'll be honest with you, I probably would have loved that game. It probably would have been an instant favorite of mine. But as the years have gone by, those types of strict action games, they honestly just don't click with me. They really don't. And for whatever reason, it's just not enough to hold my attention for a long time. And it's just not something that I'd be willing to pay a lot of money for. Now, obviously, these God of War games are a lot cheaper now. But to me, it's just not enough for me to, stay interested in. And I know the story's probably really awesome. And I understand that. But the fact that I missed out on that when I was younger, just because my parents were more strict. And they were like, my friends, they were playing Grand Theft Auto, they were playing God of War, they were playing all these, more violent games where I'm sitting here playing Jimmy Neutron. I mean, come on. Like, I mean, Jimmy Neutron was kind of violent in a way too, but it was just a completely different thing for me. And like during that time, I never developed a like for hack and slash games. I've never developed a like for Kratos or anything like that. It's just when I look at the new God of War game, it looks awesome. But I don't feel, and I understand that, and I do understand that this new game's a reboot. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. It's sitting at a 94 on Metacritic, which, I always like to play a game for myself to figure out, what I would give the game. So I don't really go by ratings. If it's a bad rating, and if it's a game I'm interested in, I'm still going to go get the game and see if I like it. And if I don't, then I'll make my decision. But I like to make an informed decision on how I view games. And I understand that this is a complete reboot. But the characters and stuff, I feel like people are really, drawn to the game because they like the original God of War series, where I just never got a chance to play it, and I just never, had the desire to play it. Really, after a certain point in time, I'm like, oh, that game sounds awesome. I'd love to play God of War. But after that time was over, it was like, I'm just not feeling it. And even when PlayStation 3 first came out, I had a Wii during that time for the majority of that generation. And I was just like, well, I mean, it's just not something that I'm interested in. And everyone's talking about it and how great it is. But because I wasn't allowed to play it, we never developed that relationship with Kratos or God of War or, any of the characters in the game. It just never happened for me. So I think that's why when I look at this game, I don't know what to think because it definitely looks more like an action adventure game, which is awesome. That's cool. It has more RPG elements, which is a big plus for me. But the character I just don't feel connected to. And it's weird because I want to get the game, and I probably will end up getting the game eventually, and who knows, maybe I'll play it on the channel. But this is just it's just crazy to me because it's very rare that a game comes out. I mean, excluding Fortnite, which I think's okay. It's not my favorite game. It's a good game. It's just not really my style of game that I like. Those online shooters and stuff like that. Not really my favorite. But it's just, so excluding that, it's bizarre to see a game like this that is so big. And this has really been an obsession. I saw an article that said this is kind of like a gamer obsession. And I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, everybody loves this game. Everyone's going crazy about this game. It's sitting at a 9.2 user score. Probably there's some trolls on there that brought that score down a bit. It's probably higher than that in reality. But it's just, it's weird for me not to be super hyped up about it. And when the game first released, I'm like, okay, this is awesome, this is awesome, this is awesome. But then it just panned out. I just don't have that desire to pick it up. And it's kind of sad. So I just wanted to kind of just talk about that and how I have this weird disconnect. And, I'm trying to think about, ways for me to get over that. And, the $60 price tag definitely doesn't help because it's just not a game that I am super interested in. And hopefully, someone's able change my mind, or I can change my mind and get it sooner. But as it stands right now, I'm looking at it, I'm thinking I'll probably get this during a price drop. But besides that, it just, it just doesn't really do anything for me. And it's just I'm kind of in a weird situation though, because I have a terrible, I have something terrible to admit with this PlayStation 4 that I have, and I love the games on it. I mean, I love the games that I have played on it. Rocket League's probably one of my favorite games, and that's kind of more suitable for me. But I haven't played the new Uncharted. I haven't played, what's the game? It's completely slipping my mind. The one with Alloy in it. Ah, man, what is that game? Well, I'm sure I'll think of it. It's everyone knows what the game I'm talking about. And I haven't played God of War, so it's the 3 big exclusives on this game that you probably need to play if you have a PlayStation 4. So I'm probably going to get this game eventually. It's just there's this weird separation that I have from Kratos. I just don't feel any emotional connection with him. Unlike last year when Breath of the Wild came out, that game honestly made me buy a Switch to get it. Like, I had a Wii U, and I'm just like, nah, man, I want to play this game on the Switch. I need to play this Zelda game on the Switch. I want to play it wherever I am, and I just need it. And it's just a different type of, if you are connected with the game franchise, you latch onto that like crazy, and you just absolutely love it. But I don't know. So we're gonna move on to the next section of this. This is kind of just trailing off. Once again, I said in the last episode, it's gonna be a bit of a grind. I'm not used to doing this. But we are going to go to our Twitter page here, and this is kind of a section because I don't have followers and I don't have people tweeting stuff at me, because God of War was our topic of the day. We're gonna head on Twitter and we're gonna retweet people that have talked about God of War. We're gonna read their tweet here on our show, and we're going to send them a little message saying that they are on episode 1 of Gamepinions. All right, so this is going to kick off our Twitter topic of the day. That's going to be God of War. So we're going to go through here and tweet some of these tweets that people have put out there. The cool thing about this section, or one of the weird things about this section, is I'm going to tweet things even if they're not related to the game, if they just mention God of War. That way we get some funny tweets in here, and get people some mentions here that they just are going to be like, wow, what is this guy even doing? So we're going to tweet this first one. It's from Jason Black at JasonAlexBlack. I marked your words and Labo wasn't huge. Seems Nintendo fans had some cardboard sprinkles in their coffee when Labo was announced, lol. Labo was never going to be the next big thing. God of War outsold it in Japan week 2 after Labo had a 71% drop-off in sales from week 1. It's a pretty steep drop-off. I'm not sure if that is factually accurate, but I mean, I wasn't really a big fan of Labo either, so I'm going to go with that. And then Tayo NC, I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name. You only get one chance at first impressions, boy. Hashtag God of War, hashtag PS4 share. There is some pretty awesome combat video that he has on there. Man, that you're kind of persuading me to play the game. This actually looks really cool. That's tempting. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to pick this up later. Our next tweet is going to be from Mike at Frostwolf_Kos. Should start a YouTube channel. First vid complaining half an hour about the new God of War. I wonder what the backstory behind that is. I wonder if he doesn't like it. That's what it seems like. So, Mike, if you ever end up watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, let me know what you don't like about it. I'm kind of curious. I'm trying to weigh the pros and cons of getting this game. If you don't like it, I'm really curious why. Maybe you preferred the older games. Maybe you just aren't a big fan of it. Maybe you think it's overrated. Okay, so our next one is going to be from Quantum Physics. This is Roy. Roiee. I think I pronounced that right. I learned I learned Norse mythology because of God of War. I mean, that's pretty awesome, man. It's good. So Wheel of Fortune at Tech Princel's right. Oh, Tep Princel's right. Okay, well, Wheel of Fortune. Okay. I hope AAA game companies look at the new God of War for the future. A solid, polished experience that you pay for. Not the Fortnite model of free-to-play, but constantly selling you things in hopes you spend way more than you would on a flat purchase. Maybe God of War. Sorry, it actually cuts off here. Let's see, what did he say? Oh, it's not gonna let me view it. Let me view your tweet, man. Oh, there it goes. Maybe God of War will save us. You know, I honestly thought the same thing when Breath of the Wild came out. It was massively popular, extremely polished. Of course, it did have DLC later on, but I feel like the content was so good and there was so much of it starting off. I don't mind paying the extra money to get more of that content. You know what I mean? I feel like the free-to-play model and stuff like that Fortnite's doing, I just feel like it's the way of the future in terms of multiplayer. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I honestly don't feel like anyone's going to save us at this point. I think that that's just so massively popular, and the fact that Fortnite is just as popular as this new God of War game is. I mean, Fortnite is all over the internet. Everybody's playing it, and it's not just people in my age group. It's people older than I am and people way younger than I am. This game is captivating everybody, even in the grade schools where it seemed like they were moving more towards the iPad stuff. With Roblox and stuff, they're playing Fortnite. I don't think there's any chance. I feel like it's too late. It's too late to save us, man. We're stuck. But we're still gonna have these experiences though. So don't get too upset. They're still going to have, these AAA games that are amazing, like God of War, like The Legend of Zelda. We're still gonna have them. Don't lose hope. But in terms of those other games, there's gonna be a lot of them. Just, throwing that out there. All right, so the next one is Daniel Ross, at Daniel Ross. He says, when I play God of War, I'm playing it as its own game. I'm not trying to compare it to the older ones, so I'm not disappointed. I seem to always compare games to the past. You know what? I feel like I kind of do that too, but you kind of have a good point here. Maybe subconsciously I'm comparing this God of War to the previous God of War games. And really, I've been saying that because I didn't have a connection with God of War in the past, I won't have one now. And maybe I should stop trying to focus on that and try to focus on creating a new connection with God of War. So maybe I should pick this game up. Maybe I should give it a try and not think about it as a God of War game, but as a brand new experience for me to try out. So I really appreciate that tweet, Daniel. That was a really good tweet. So we're going to read one more. This is going to be from Melancholy at Spencer D95. Honestly, kind of want to play the new God of War game, but I must follow through on my Mass Effect trilogy playthrough. I played 1 and 2 fairly recently, but it's probably been 3 years since I made it to the third one without getting sidetracked by something else. Man, story of my life. I am always trying to pick up new games when I already have a massive backlog of games. It's so hard though, because time is super expensive. It's hard to set aside time to play games that you want to play, but then all these new ones come out. So by the time you are, playing a game for a little while, then you stop because just life gets busy. These brand new games come out that you're just super hyped up for. You go out and buy it, you forget about the other game, and it's just an endless cycle of backlogging games. My backlog is so big that I don't think, if I stopped buying games for an entire year and focused on playing those games specifically, maybe I'd have a chance to do it. But man, it's just so hard. It's so hard to be a gamer sometimes with all these awesome games that come out. So, maybe someday I'll go through all the backlog. I posted on my Instagram. I'm just getting to Advance Wars 2 now. I'm just, getting through those games. My backlog is just, it's a little embarrassingly big. So, here's the 2018, trying to get our backlog, a little bit emptier. So, I don't know. But that's a fun section though. I like that segment. We're gonna get it a little bit more streamlined for the future episodes, I think, which is gonna be a lot of fun. But the cool thing about this section is that some of the topics won't make sense when we read them. This one, because it's the first segment, I just kind of wanted to find ones that made a little bit more sense. So I thank everyone that I retweeted there. I really enjoyed your tweets, and that's going to actually wrap up this episode. So After reading those tweets, though, I will say that I do feel a little bit more inclined to try out God of War. Daniel's tweet there was pretty awesome. Just trying to. Sometimes you just have to think outside of your thought process. Sometimes you get locked up by yourself, and in a way, it's just, it locks you down. It locks you down to a primary way of thinking. So, I think I'm probably gonna try God of War. I'm not sure when. I still might wait for a price drop, but I'm not sure. I know everyone's been kind of bugging me to get it. So I don't know. Well, we'll see. We'll see. But this is going to wrap up Gamepinions episode 1. Thank you so much for listening. Next week we'll have episode 2, and that's pretty much it. So I will see you guys later. Always have to do some kind of crazy outro for some reason. I don't know why. But have a good day.